Hi. You're watching Reddit Confessions. If you're here for a story that doesn't start with butterflies and happily ever afters, you're in the right place. I was standing behind a curtain in a church I'd never liked, wearing a rented suit that smelled like cheap cologne and someone else's regrets, when my phone buzzed. It was her. Kendra. The same woman who told me I was too boring to be a long-term investment. The same woman who asked me, with a straight face, if I'd mind moving out because she needed more aesthetic space for her self-work. Her text. Just 4 words. Are you really doing this? I stared at it. No question mark. Just flat, passive-aggressive punctuationless panic. That's when the organ music started playing. And for the first time in nearly a year, I smiled without forcing it. See, this story doesn't begin with a love story, it begins with a demolition. A controlled collapse. The kind where you stand there watching your own life get bulldozed, and the person driving the machine is someone you kissed goodnight for 7 years. Let me take you back, not to a romantic beginning, but to a Tuesday. It was raining. I remember because I slipped while taking the trash out, and when I came back inside, soaking wet, Kendra looked up from her laptop and said, "Can you be more quiet?" I'm journaling. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "Oh no, let me get you a towel." Just that, flat, detached, and annoyed I dared to exist too loudly. She'd been like that for months. Distant. Cold. Like I was interrupting her solo podcast about her personal evolution. She stopped cooking. Stopped talking. Stopped touching me. Started treating me like a background character in the documentary of her awakening. And then, that same Tuesday night, she hit me with it. "Lonnie, I need you to leave. I'm not inspired anymore. And this house, it's not helping." I blinked. Not inspired. Was I a Pinterest board? A scented candle that lost its spark? She handed me a box of my things like she'd been planning it. My sweaters were already folded. My favorite mug, the one that said, "World's okayest husband," was stuffed with socks. She even packed my phone charger. And just like that, I was gone. No affair. No screaming match. Just silence. She said she wanted space. And she took everything. But here's where it gets messy, and if you're still with me, buckle in. Because months later, I was standing at the altar with someone else. Not out of revenge. Not out of pride. But because someone actually looked at me like I mattered. And just when I thought she'd vanished from my life for good, Kendra showed up. In the back row. No invite. Tears in her eyes. And a look on her face like the ghost of regret had finally arrived. And Reddit, that's only the beginning. Wait until you hear what she did after I said, "I do." I didn't look at her. Not once. Not when I walked past the pews. Not when I felt her stare burning into the side of my face. Not even when I saw the unmistakable shimmer of tears reflecting off the stained glass light behind her. I kept my eyes forward, because if I looked back, I wasn't sure I'd be able to stay calm. Not with everything she had done. Not after the way she discarded me like I was clutter in her mental storage. But let's not jump ahead. After Kendra kicked me out that rainy Tuesday, I spent the first 2 nights sleeping in my car, parked outside a 24-hour laundromat that smelled like detergent and desperation. I used my work blazer as a blanket and tried to convince myself this was temporary. That she'd call. That she'd say she was sorry. That she didn't mean it. That maybe she had a breakdown or a bad dream or a moment of weakness. She didn't. In fact, the first call I got was from my internet provider, letting me know the account had been switched to her name. The second? A notification from Instagram. Kendra had posted a photo of herself in our kitchen, drinking green juice with the caption, "Fresh start." Unapologetically me. It had barely been 72 hours. I moved into an old coworker's guest room, Mac, who lived above a deli and played sad blues guitar at night. He didn't ask questions. Just handed me a key, a blanket, and said, "Bathroom's down the hall. Water pressure sucks, but at least it's warm." It wasn't home. But it was something. Meanwhile, Kendra was thriving. Or at least pretending to. Her social media turned into a curated gallery of self-love quotes, sunlit selfies, and vague mentions of a new partner in growth. She never tagged him, but I saw glimpses. A freckled hand in one story. A deep laugh in a live video. An unfamiliar shoe on the rug I bought with my Christmas bonus. The unraveling continued quietly. Our joint savings. She drained it. Said she was reinvesting in herself. Our wedding photos. Deleted from her pages. And friends, mutual ones, began dropping me one by one, like I'd been the problem all along. Kendra always knew how to shape a narrative. And I never knew how to defend myself without sounding pathetic. So I stayed quiet. And then something strange happened. Her sister, Dana, reached out. Now, Dana and I weren't close. She always seemed annoyed by how passive I was, her words, not mine. But one night, out of the blue, she sent me a message, "You didn't deserve that. She's not who she pretends to be." That message hit harder than I expected. I replied. She replied. It turned into a call. Then another. We weren't flirting, don't get me wrong, but for the first time since my life fell apart, someone actually asked how I was doing and didn't flinch when I told them the truth. Around that same time, I started seeing someone. Her name was Eliza. A friend of a friend. Reserved. Quiet. Kind in a way that didn't need to be loud. She worked at a community library and said things like, "You don't need to be interesting to be loved." I didn't fall fast, I was too broken for that. But something in me shifted. Slowly. Carefully. And for once, I felt like maybe I wasn't just a cautionary tale. 6 months after Kendra kicked me out, Eliza and I were sitting on the floor of her apartment, eating cold pizza and watching reruns, when she asked, "What would you do if she came back?" I didn't even need to think. I said, "Nothing. I already left." That's when I knew. Not just that I was done with Kendra, but that I wanted more. That I deserved more. And Eliza, she didn't fix me. She just let me feel safe being broken. So yes, I proposed. And she said yes with tears in her eyes and hands that didn't shake. We planned something small. Simple. Honest. And on the morning of our wedding, right before I turned my phone off, Kendra's name lit up my screen. I heard. "I'm coming." She didn't ask. She announced. Like she still had a right to insert herself into moments she gave up long ago. I turned off my phone. But as I stood at the altar and saw her slip through the back pew, wearing the same dress she wore to our engagement dinner 2 years ago, I realized something. Kendra never wanted me. She just didn't want to be replaced. They say some ghosts only haunt you when you try to move on. I never believed in that kind of thing, until I saw her standing at the edge of the ceremony, wearing a twisted smile and heels too tall for a woman who claimed to have outgrown shallow performances. Kendra didn't sit. She loitered. Hovered. Her eyes were scanning every detail like she was taking mental inventory of the life she forfeited. The flowers. The music. The way Eliza looked like peace wrapped in ivory satin. Kendra's arms were crossed, lips slightly parted, like she wanted to speak but couldn't find a moment to hijack. Her presence wasn't loud, but it was heavy. Like someone had opened a window to a room you just finished cleaning, and in flew the storm you'd spent months avoiding. But here's the wild part. We didn't stop the wedding. Eliza saw her. Of course she did. She leaned in while the priest flipped through his notes and whispered, "Is that her?" I nodded slowly. I expected her to tremble, maybe flinch, or even ask to pause. But instead, she smiled and said, "Then let's make this part really unforgettable." And we did. I said vows I wrote on napkins during nights I couldn't sleep. Eliza's voice didn't crack once as she spoke hers. There were no dramatics. Just raw, exposed words and a truth I hadn't felt in years. I was finally marrying someone who chose me with both hands. We walked out as husband and wife. People clapped. Someone threw dried lavender. My cousin slipped and almost took out a row of chairs. Everyone laughed. Everyone but Kendra. She left before the reception. But not without leaving a mark. When I turned my phone back on the next morning, I had 5 missed calls, 2 voicemails, and 1 very long text from her. It read like a screenplay. Nostalgia, regret, bitterness, half-baked apologies buried in backhanded compliments. She said she thought I'd wait longer. That she assumed I'd take time to heal. That watching me move on so publicly was cruel and performative. Performative? This, from the woman who documented her single era with selfies of her liberated legs in bubble baths while I ate instant noodles in a drafty guest room trying not to cry where the cats could see me? No. I didn't reply. I wasn't going to defend my happiness to someone who once said my voice made her feel stuck. I wasn't going to offer closure to someone who handed me a cardboard box like it was a mercy mission. But she didn't stop. A week into my honeymoon, Eliza and I went off-grid to a quiet cabin in the Berkshires. Kendra sent a photo. No caption. Just a shot of the mug I left behind at her place. The one that said, "Good men still exist." It was broken. Shattered in pieces on her hardwood floor, with a small puddle of tea or whiskey or whatever fake comfort she poured into it. That's when Eliza saw my phone and asked, "Is she trying to punish you for healing?" It hit me harder than I thought. Because that's exactly what it felt like. This wasn't about love. Not anymore. It wasn't even about regret. It was about control. The kind that doesn't scream but manipulates in silence. Kendra had released me physically, sure, but emotionally. She wanted to keep one hand on my spine, just in case I stood too tall. But here's where things take a sharp turn. 2 days later, Dana, the same sister who once messaged me in secret, sent me a voice memo. No greeting. No explanation. Just the sound of Kendra sobbing. And then she said, between broken breaths, "I thought he'd never be brave enough to let go. I didn't think he'd actually leave, not really." That memo? I still haven't deleted it. Not because I care, but because it reminds me how wrong I was to think loving her hard enough would make her stay. So now what? Well, what came next wasn't peace. Not yet. Because Kendra wasn't finished. And the next move she made? It didn't just target me. It went straight for Eliza. It started small. A comment here. A DM there. At first, we didn't even realize it was Kendra. Eliza had posted a photo of us having coffee at a lakeside cafe, something innocent and sweet, me laughing with whipped cream on my nose, her caption reading, "He still lets me steal the foam off the top." I'd never looked happier in a picture, and maybe that's what made it sting for Kendra. Because less than an hour after it went live, the messages started pouring in. Not the most flattering shot, but glad you're moving on. Must be nice having a do-over husband. She looks like someone who likes broken men. They weren't from her directly, but the usernames were all newly created. No profile pictures. Weirdly specific references to things no stranger would know, like the time I once cried during a slow dance at a friend's wedding, or how I used to alphabetize our pantry because it helped with my anxiety. Creepy, cruel, and unmistakably her. We blocked them, of course. We tried not to let it ruin the afterglow of being newlyweds. But it felt like walking with a pebble in your shoe, too small to stop for, too sharp to ignore. Kendra wasn't knocking on our door, but she was peering through digital windows, whispering poison through the cracks. Then came the email. It was sent to Eliza's work inbox. The subject line, "Just in case you didn't know who he really is." She opened it before I had the chance to intercept. Inside were screenshots. Old texts. Misleading excerpts from conversations Kendra and I had during the final months of our marriage, cherry-picked to look like I was obsessed with her, begging to stay, blaming Eliza for ruining us. It was dirty. Manipulative. The kind of thing that only works if the recipient doesn't know you deeply. But Eliza read it, and then laughed. Not a cruel laugh. A knowing one. She looked up at me and said, "Wow. She really thought I'd fall for this." I stood there blinking like an idiot, bracing for a confrontation that never came. That was the thing about Eliza. She didn't overreact. She didn't weaponize my past. She just closed the laptop, kissed my temple, and said, "Let's go for a walk. I need air." But Kendra wasn't done. 2 days later, someone called Eliza's workplace pretending to be from a background check agency. Said they were verifying a report that her new husband had a history of emotional instability and workplace misconduct. Of course, it went nowhere. The HR department quickly realized it was fake. But the damage wasn't in the lie. It was in the effort. The time. The obsession. Kendra had moved from subtle jabs to full-blown sabotage. And I started to feel it creeping in again, that old, familiar shame. Like maybe I had brought this into Eliza's life. Like maybe I didn't deserve her peace. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I should have warned her more. Told her about the way Kendra could twist anything. About how she once convinced a mutual friend I was addicted to painkillers simply because I took Advil for migraines. And then, it got worse. A box showed up at our apartment door. No return address. Inside were photographs, printed, physical photos. Some of me and Kendra back when things were good. Some of us in bed, on vacation, laughing, kissing. But the last photo? It was of Eliza. At her library. Standing at the counter helping a child pick out a book. It was recent. That one froze my blood. Kendra wasn't just watching. She was following. I took the box to the police. Filed a report. But with no direct threat, they couldn't do much. They said to document everything and stay alert. That night, I sat Eliza down and said, "If you want out of this, I'll understand. You didn't sign up for a war." She didn't blink. She just took my hand and said, "No, Lonnie. I signed up for you. She's the one trying to fight something that's already lost." Still, I couldn't shake it. Kendra was unraveling, and I knew her well enough to know what came next wasn't going to be just emotional. She wanted a scene. An audience. A breaking point. And I was terrified she'd show up again. But I was wrong. She didn't show up. She sent someone else. It was a Sunday afternoon, one of those quiet ones where the whole world seems to be holding its breath. Eliza and I were trying to salvage the last bit of peace we had left after a week filled with fake calls, poisoned emails, and surveillance-level creepiness. We had just finished reorganizing the living room, nothing major, just moving a bookshelf and replacing a few framed pictures that still made me flinch when I walked by them. I was just starting to believe the storm had finally passed when someone knocked on our door. It wasn't a frantic knock. It wasn't loud or threatening. It was measured. Almost polite. I opened the door expecting a neighbor, a delivery, anything but what I saw, a woman in her late 50s with the kind of poise that's clearly rehearsed, standing there in a beige trench coat, holding a folder. Her eyes looked like she hadn't slept. Her lipstick was faded, her hands slightly trembling. "Lonnie?" she asked. "Yes." She extended her hand. "I'm Irene. Kendra's mother." And just like that, the bottom dropped out of the hour. Now here's the thing, I'd never met Kendra's mom before. She and Kendra had been estranged most of our relationship. Kendra once said she was a toxic energy cloud and refused to invite her to our wedding. But now, here she was. On my porch. Alone. And clearly not there to reminisce. I need to talk to you. Please, she said, glancing toward Eliza who'd just come into view behind me. Eliza didn't hesitate. Come in, she said softly, stepping aside. We offered Irene tea. She didn't take it. She just sat at the edge of the couch, that folder clenched in her lap like it held the only truth she still trusted. I sat across from her, bracing myself for a guilt trip or some last-ditch plea to forgive her daughter. But it wasn't that. What Irene told us in the next 15 minutes changed everything. Kendra's not well, she started. I know that sounds obvious now, but you need to hear the whole thing. I should have said something earlier. Years earlier. She opened the folder. Inside were medical records, therapy reports, and something else, police paperwork. I couldn't make sense of it all. Irene laid it out piece by piece. 3 months before Kendra and I met, she had been arrested for stalking an ex-boyfriend. Not some jealous outburst, a full-blown obsession. She keyed his car, sent threatening letters to the woman he started dating, created anonymous profiles to harass them both online. She was diagnosed with a behavioral disorder. Spent 8 weeks in a rehab clinic. After that, she cut ties with her mother completely. She doesn't let people get close for too long, Irene said. She gets bored. Then paranoid. Then cruel. And if they leave her first, she spirals. I felt my whole body go cold. I looked at Eliza, her eyes weren't angry. They were focused. Like she'd just figured out the ending of a story and was silently daring it to prove her wrong. I came to warn you, Irene continued. Because she's worse now than I've ever seen. I think she's planning something. Something public. Eliza stood. What do you mean public? She's angry that you replaced her. That people saw you happy without her. She thinks you humiliated her. She's not trying to get Lonnie back. She's trying to destroy what you have. I felt like I couldn't breathe. She's not just showing up uninvited, Irene said. She's rehearsing. She wants a scene. She needs to be the victim again. I sat in stunned silence. So many puzzle pieces clicked into place, how fast she moved after the breakup, the performative sorrow, the sudden reappearance at the wedding. She hadn't come to watch me marry Eliza. She'd come to watch herself lose. And now, she wanted to rewrite the ending. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the apartment made me sit up. Every flicker of light outside the window made me check the locks. Eliza lay next to me, reading with the calm of someone who refused to be baited. I'm not afraid of her, she said when she noticed me staring at the ceiling again. I am, I whispered. Not because of what she might do to me, but because I brought her into your life. You didn't bring her here, Eliza replied. She followed us. But that doesn't mean we let her inside. The next day, we installed cameras. Changed our phone numbers. Alerted our building manager. Eliza even talked to her job security team. We did everything we could think of to stay ahead of her. But none of it stopped what happened next. Because a week later, during a fundraiser at the library where Eliza worked, where she was scheduled to speak in front of over 200 donors and staff, someone snuck into the building just after the event started. And that someone was carrying a microphone, a flash drive, and a script. The fundraiser was meant to be a quiet celebration. Eliza had spent weeks preparing for it, printing flyers, arranging seating, rehearsing her speech in our living room every night until I could quote it back to her word for word. It was the biggest event of the year for the library, meant to showcase its outreach programs, bring in donations, and prove once again that a community can be built on something as simple as stories. People in suits and vintage cardigans filled the hall. Fresh-cut flowers lined the walls. There was even a small string quartet by the back doors. And somewhere in the middle of it, walking calmly through the entrance without so much as a sideways glance from security, was Kendra. I didn't see her until it was too late. I was in the crowd, seated near the front beside Eliza's boss, trying to record her speech with my phone like a proud husband. She looked stunning, composed, the kind of graceful that comes from genuine sincerity. Her voice echoed through the room, soft but clear. Until it didn't. A loud, deliberate click interrupted the quiet. The microphone was cut. A second voice replaced it over the speakers. Tinny, rehearsed, venomous. Sorry to interrupt your little story time, but I think the audience deserves some context. Heads turned. People began whispering. I stood, confused, scanning the room, and then I saw her. Standing by the back table, holding a microphone she must have snatched from the AV booth. Her hair tied up like she was attending a press conference. A flash drive dangling from her fingers like bait. Kendra. Eliza froze. Security moved toward her, but she held up her hands and said, 1 minute. That's all I need. 1 minute to expose the lie you're all applauding. They hesitated, just long enough for her to press play on the recording she'd brought. Suddenly, the speakers filled with my voice. It was a private voicemail. From me. One I'd left Kendra months ago. A raw, broken message I barely remembered recording during the early nights after she kicked me out. In it, I told her I missed her. That I didn't understand what went wrong. That I still loved her. My voice cracked in the recording. I begged. I wept. I could feel 200 pairs of eyes swinging toward me. Kendra smiled like she just detonated a bomb. This is the man you're celebrating, she said, eyes fixed on Eliza. The man who told me he loved me long after you two were involved. Do you know what else he said? She paused, her expression shifting to mockery. He told me he felt trapped. That last word echoed hard. My breath left me. Eliza turned to look at me, not with anger, but with a terrifying calm. She wasn't confused. She wasn't afraid. She was calculating. Security finally stepped in, moving toward Kendra. She didn't fight. She simply dropped the flash drive on the floor and let herself be escorted out. The entire event went silent. Eliza stepped away from the podium without a word. The crowd sat in stunned confusion. I followed her backstage, stumbling through people, desperate to explain. Eliza, that voicemail. She raised her hand, silencing me. I know what that was, she said. But Lonnie, that's not the point. I stood there, shaking, heart pounding, waiting for her to say she was done. Instead, she said something I'll never forget. She's not trying to ruin you, Lonnie. She's trying to break me. That's when I realized the full scope of it. Kendra had saved that message. Not because she missed me. Not because she believed we had a future. But because she wanted to use my lowest moment to humiliate the woman I now loved. She wanted to shatter Eliza's faith in me, by dragging out a version of myself that no longer existed. And the scariest part? It almost worked. Over the next week, the fallout was brutal. Eliza's reputation at work was called into question, despite the truth. Gossip traveled faster than facts. People assumed. Opinions were whispered behind closed doors. Her boss tried to stand by her, but donations dropped. Parents canceled library visits. One local columnist wrote a piece about professionalism and personal boundaries, without naming names but making the target clear. I offered to step down from everything. Go dark. Hide until it passed. Eliza said no. We didn't do anything wrong, she told me. And I won't let her turn our lives into her stage. Still, we were shaken. The foundation we'd built, solid and slow, suddenly had cracks. I could feel them, even if Eliza tried to patch them up with calm assurances. That night, as we sat on the couch, watching bad TV just to keep the silence out, my phone buzzed again. Kendra. A video this time. No message. I hit play. It was a recording of her sitting in a therapist's office. Crying. Telling the camera she'd been emotionally manipulated. That she was abandoned. That she was unsafe around me. That she felt erased. And at the end of it, a title card appeared. My truth. Posting soon. She wasn't just playing dirty anymore. She was going public. It went live at 8:42 a.m. on a Thursday. The video. Kendra posted it to every platform she had, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, even LinkedIn for God's sake. I don't know what kind of person uploads personal drama to a professional resume site, but she did it, with a perfectly worded caption that read, "For those who only know one side of the story. This is mine." Within 3 hours, it had 40,000 views. By the end of the day, it was pushing 6 figures. I know because people from high school I hadn't spoken to in 15 years started messaging me. Old coworkers. Distant cousins. Even my 3rd grade teacher, Mrs. Hannah, who emailed me to say she was praying for clarity and peace. The video was 10 minutes long. Kendra had edited it masterfully, slow piano music in the background, muted lighting, strategically placed tissues that she dabbed her eyes with every few sentences. She called me L, never saying my name directly, which somehow made it feel more sinister, like she was protecting the villain in her story. She painted a picture of a manipulative, emotionally distant husband who used her, and then paraded a new woman like a trophy while she was still picking up the pieces. She told them I never wanted children. That I resented her ambition. That I made her feel invisible in her own home. All lies. Distorted half-truths woven into a tragic monologue. She even played part of the same voicemail she'd used at the fundraiser, cutting it off just after I said, "I don't know how to live without you." No context. No timeline. Just my voice, raw and shaky, played over her fake tears. The comments section was a war zone. People calling me trash. A narcissist. A coward. People defending her. Telling her she was so brave. That her story mattered. That healing is not linear. And then came the worst part. Someone recognized Eliza. A blurry photo of her was pulled from the fundraiser event and posted in the comments under the phrase, "Is this the other woman?" From there, it snowballed. People found our wedding announcement. Someone screenshotted our registry. A TikTok user made a side-by-side breakdown of Kendra's story and Eliza's bio, asking, "Did this library director steal someone's husband?" It didn't matter that Eliza and I met after the divorce. It didn't matter that Kendra had kicked me out. It didn't matter that I had been living on a futon when Eliza offered me a cup of tea and asked if I liked poetry. Truth didn't trend. The board at Eliza's library called for a meeting. Not disciplinary, just to discuss reputational risk. They were polite about it. Sympathetic, even. But they couldn't ignore the optics. A public figure, even a minor one, wrapped in a viral scandal wasn't good for donor confidence. That night, she came home quiet. Dropped her bag at the door. Kicked off her shoes. Walked straight to the bedroom. I followed her, heart in my throat, afraid she was done. Not with Kendra. With me. She sat on the edge of the bed, looked up, and said, "I can't lose this job, Lonnie." "You won't," I said, kneeling in front of her. But I didn't sound convincing. Not even to myself. I've worked my whole life to get here. And now some people think I'm a homewrecker because a woman who abandoned you decided she wanted her audience back. I didn't know what to say. I reached for her hand, and she let me take it. But her fingers were tense, her grip uncertain. "I love you," I whispered. "I know," she said. But love doesn't cancel noise. That night, we slept in the same bed, but it felt like we were continents apart. She cried quietly. Thought I didn't hear. I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how much of this was my fault. Wondering if I should have pushed harder to stop Kendra before she infected everything I'd rebuilt. The next morning, I decided I couldn't wait anymore. I recorded my own video. No music. No cuts. Just one take. One chair. One man with red eyes and a tired voice. I told the truth. That Kendra had kicked me out. That I had begged her to stay, yes, but after she told me she didn't love me anymore. That the voicemail was real, but so was the silence that followed it. That Eliza had nothing to do with the collapse of my marriage. That she, in fact, had saved me from it. I didn't defend myself with fury. I just spoke like a man who finally understood that sometimes, the only way to win against a liar is to tell the truth so quietly, it can't be ignored. I uploaded it and turned off my phone. For 2 days, I didn't check it. And on the third day, something happened. I got an email from Dana, Kendra's sister. It had 2 words. It's over. No context. No attachments. But I had a feeling something big was coming. And I was right. Because the next time I heard Kendra's name, it wasn't from a text, a call, or a video. It was from a lawyer. The letter came in a plain envelope. No logo. No scent. Just wait. I recognized the law firm's name right away. It was the one Kendra used during our divorce. For a second, my stomach dropped. I thought, what now? A lawsuit? A cease and desist? I braced for another fire, another storm, another fight to protect what little peace we still had left. But when I opened it, the air left the room. It was a retraction. Signed. Stamped. Official. Kendra's legal team had sent notice that she was formally withdrawing the defamatory statements made against me and Eliza. No lawsuit. No threats. Just a short explanation that their client regrets the public distress caused and acknowledges the emotional damage inflicted through the dissemination of incomplete personal narratives. Incomplete personal narratives. That was as close to, I lied, as we were ever going to get. And I was okay with that. It didn't undo the damage. But it was something. It turned out Dana, her sister, had finally stepped in. After watching Kendra spiral one too many times, she'd spoken to a journalist who had been preparing to run a story about online manipulation and the misuse of mental health narratives. When Kendra found out someone might dig deeper into her truth, she folded. Fast. She took the videos down. Every post, every clip, every comment reply, gone. She issued a vague apology on her socials about overstepping boundaries during an emotional time, and then, she went quiet. No more cryptic captions. No more anonymous attacks. Just silence. And for the first time in over a year, it actually felt safe to breathe. Eliza didn't get her job back right away. But the public statement helped. The board eventually reinstated her full duties and issued their own apology for reacting prematurely to unverified internet speculation. The fundraiser money came back in. The parents returned with their kids. And people finally stopped whispering behind her back. And me? I finally stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. We moved, not far, just enough to start over without completely starting over. A new apartment with soft yellow walls, no memories in the corners. We planted herbs on the windowsill and argued over what color to paint the cabinets. She won. They're sage green. I hate them. But I love her. We laugh more now. Not out of relief. Out of real, unfiltered joy. The kind that doesn't have to compete with someone else's shadow. Last week, we celebrated our 1-year anniversary. I looked at Eliza, sitting across the table from me in a little Italian place with too much candle wax on the tablecloth, and I finally said it without hesitation, without guilt. I'm glad she kicked me out. Because if Kendra hadn't, if she hadn't torn me apart, if she hadn't shown me exactly how little I meant to her in the end, I never would have known what real love felt like. I never would have learned that choosing peace isn't weakness. It's survival. And I never would have found Eliza. Thanks for watching this story on Reddit Confessions. If you've ever had a moment where everything fell apart, only to lead you somewhere better, drop it in the comments. What was your turning point? And hey, if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stick around for more true confessions just like this one. Until next time, take care of yourselves. And remember, sometimes, losing everything is just the beginning.